the only things anyone has ever mentioned to me.
So essential fatty acids are unsaturated oils, correct?
That's what they say, but I've never seen any evidence that convinced me that they had proved that they are essential. For example, they say you need them to make membranes, but you can grow cells in a culture dish in a completely fat-free mixture. And so the cells divide and act like normal cells, but there's no fat being added, so it can't be essential for making membranes.
So obviously it was miscategorized or misnamed or misrepresented.
Well, the Burrs, I think it was basic incompetence that they didn't deal with the contrary evidence. They just simply ignored several very good and important studies and announced that their study had defined the essentiality of a nutrient, which other studies had denied, and presented very good contradictory evidence. So when you look at the particular studies that are used as the basis for saying that they are essential, those studies definitely don't do it. So I'm still waiting for someone to show me evidence that these fats are essential.
I take it you have your coconut oil every day, right?
Not every day, but when I think of it.
Are there certain things that you take every day?
Yeah, milk. I try to keep my calcium intake high. Calcium and thyroid are very closely connected. The thyroid and the parathyroid hormone not only live in the same part of your body, but they're very closely interacting. A hypothyroid person tends to have hyperactive parathyroid function. And the parathyroid dissolves the bones and tends to put calcium in places where it doesn't belong. When you aren't eating enough calcium to suppress the parathyroid hormone, then your body draws calcium out of the bones to make up for it. And so chronic low intake of calcium or low thyroid function will eventually make your bones weaker and weaker as you age.
What do you eat to get your calcium? How do you get your calcium?
Milk and cheese, mostly.
Any particular amount?
Yeah, I used to, I think, average about a gallon of milk a day, but over the decades, I think I'm now averaging maybe just a little over 2 quarts with some cheese.
Yeah, the milk is really pasteurized now and homogenized and really changed, let alone what's happening with the cows and what they're doing to the cows to get the milk now. It's a whole new world, isn't it?
Yeah, but when you look at all of the other changes in food supply in the United States, the other things are, I think, almost invariably they're riskier than the processed milk.
What are you thinking about, the radiation?
Yeah, and even with organic foods, you have the natural toxicants in the foods, but then the average supermarket food has been exposed to a lot of processing chemicals. For example, I advocate having a lot of gelatin if you're a meat eater. In the Orient and Latin America, chicken foot soup is a way people get extra gelatin. But it turns out in the United States, the chickens have to be processed with a chlorine-based antiseptic foot bath before they're slaughtered. So the American supply of chicken feet is almost always contaminated with a chemical solution. A lot of chemicals show up in the food supply that don't have to be listed on the label as processing agents somewhere along the line.
So how do we get gelatin? What's another way we can get gelatin? Is there a certain type of gelatin?
Yeah, if you buy the tough and bony cuts, like a lamb shoulder chop will have a lot more gelatin than a regular lamb roast or lamb chop of the more expensive kind. And oxtail soup is extremely rich in gelatin.
Does it have to be from an animal?
Yeah, gelatin only comes from an animal. And if you are not going to eat the meat, then the egg and milk, they don't have the virtues of gelatin, but they do have such a high concentration of other nutrients that you can get a balance of nutrients if you combine fruits and vegetables with the milk, eggs, and cheese.
Let's talk a little bit about pregnenolone. This is a really important supplement that you've been talking about, writing about for years, and it's also part of the orthomolecular array of supplements that people can take. You've been talking about it for so many years. I want you to share with the audience about pregnenolone.
I just sort of accidentally discovered its value, and that started me reading about it. I had been experimenting how best to assimilate a supplement of progesterone and DHEA, and so I was trying all of the steroids that I had at hand in different solvents, and vitamin E worked very well for DHEA and progesterone, but it didn't seem to dissolve very much of the pregnenolone, and so I had a bottle of vitamin E that I was using just to use it up as a supplement. And during a trip of a few weeks, I started getting sick and went back and was so sick I was staying in bed for, I guess, a few weeks before it occurred to me that the only thing different on that trip was that I had not had my little bottle of vitamin E with me. And I thought, could it be that that E had retained some of the pregnenolone that I had stirred into it? And so I got up and took just a pinch of plain pregnenolone powder. And in about 30 or 40 minutes, all of my symptoms had disappeared. That was 1984. And since then, the symptoms have never returned. For several years, I took every 10 days, I would take a good fat pinch of pregnenolone, maybe 300 milligrams. And one dose of it for me would last 10 days before the symptoms would return. And I bought a kilogram of it to experiment with it, and to see what a big dose did, I would take 3,000 or 4,000 milligrams at a time.
Wow.
It didn't feel any different to me than 30 milligrams at a time. But just to be sure it wasn't having any side effects that I could see, the main side effects were that it tightened up skin that had been loose and made me look younger and prevented all of the other migraine-like symptoms I had been having. But I ate the whole kilogram in just about a year, around 3 grams a day on average.
What else does it do?
Well, after I saw that it was harmless, I started giving it to my friends. One friend who was 82 or so at the time was purple when I visited him at a high-altitude town in Mexico, and all of his functions were slow. He had trouble even standing up and was panting from emphysema, professionally diagnosed emphysema, and all of his tissues were starved for oxygen. I gave him probably an average of 500 milligrams a day for a week or two, and when I came back, I think it was just 2 weeks later, his skin color was normal. His office was upstairs, a very steep climb on the stairs to get to his office every day. He took me to his office and then insisted on walking around the city, showing me various projects that he had, where he had hardly been able to stand up 2 weeks before. He was now making me pant with the exertion.
So for audiences that are listening to you, talk about it, if you can now, much more directly. What does it do? What does it offer?
I saw it doing things like that, just immediately curing emphysema in his case, and several other very quick things like bulgy eyeballs from so-called Graves' disease that retracted so the person could close her eyelids in just a couple of hours. Those changes were so fast, I started trying to understand what was happening. It definitely wasn't an ordinary hormone effect. It seemed to be, in effect, causing swollen tissues, waterlogged tissues, to be able to release the water that was causing the lining of the lung to be thickened and closed up, and cause the tissue behind the eyeballs to be waterlogged and swollen, so that just like squeezing